Okay, so it looks like we've got everybody joining us who's coming this evening, or at least at this early time. So I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome everybody to our latest round in our online presentation series. We've got some really informative stuff on for you tonight. So I'm looking forward, or tonight, this afternoon, really looking forward to hearing from our speakers on the digital networks in regional Australia. Is it a field of dreams or a highway to hell? Sounds like we ought to be running some wild, crazy music in the background there. Okay, so just a couple of housekeeping notes. A reminder here that this event is being recorded and broadcast live via Facebook so that our greater entourage, friends, family and other stakeholders can all enjoy this informative material. A feedback survey will be sent out tonight to registered attendees. And we are, as usual, seeking improvements, your thoughts on future topics, and any offers from members who want to do some demos or prezos of their own to let us know about their shiny new networks or great funky new technology that they've got on the offer. Or even perhaps if you just want to do some peering socials. Hey, my network's this big, it has so many routes, we're in so many places, you should come peer with me. Throughout the session, can you please post your questions to both the Q&A and chat windows, which we'll be monitoring, and we'll make sure that those go through to the speakers when there is a suitable time. There will be a lucky door prize also given away at the end of the proceedings, so you do need to hang around to get that exciting and wonderful new thing. I believe it will be a MikroTik router or something of some incredible utility and which have been very popular in the past, so I'm sure you'll appreciate one of those should you get one. So anyway, let us know if there are any improvements you think we can make or any great future topics. Now, I do want to give you a quick heads up on our upcoming events. We're getting more and more organised all the time, folks. In May, we're partnering with WITWA, the Women in Technology group in Western Australia, and NextDC to do an Internet of Things session, and it will be, hold on to your seats, folks, it'll be in person. We're hoping also to broadcast it live as well, so we can get it out to everybody, but there will be an in-person event for those wonderful Perth folks. We'll also be doing a joint event with the Australian Computer Society in July. It'll be mainly my thoughts on what's happening on the internet infrastructure front, and that will be in person, but also broadcast live on Facebook and so forth as well. That'll be down at their premises down in Barangaroo here in Sydney. So we'll be doing a shared event with them. And of course, we've set a date for our AGM because this year, oh my gosh, OzNog's going to be in person as well. So we'll be able to have our AGM alongside OzNog like we have been for the last few years. So that will be exciting. That will be on September the 1st at 4 p.m, the day before the OzNog conference kicks off. Okay, a quick reminder too that the board has adopted a code of conduct for our events. So basically, in summary, be nice to each other during this, be respectful. We've all got expertise in a range of areas. Some people know more than others. Some need perhaps to think more about how they say it, and that could be me. But let's all be accepting and support others so that they can participate effectively and fully in this. If people can't play nicely, I'm afraid we will have to kick you out. And you can appeal this, but we won't let you back in on this occasion. Okay, now there's a few things we've noticed on the exchange of late that perhaps people need a little bit of extra tuition in. There's some things that people get wrong, things that people get right, and things that get that perhaps need another going over. So I've got Aaron here tonight, who's just going to give you a quick update on some of the things that we've been seeing in the BGP world. So perhaps, Aaron, if I could hand over to you to do some sharing here, and you can give people a quick update.
No worries. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. My name's Aaron Chidiak and I'm a peering engineer at IAX Australia as well as New Zealand Internet Exchange, and I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about our policy tools, how you can use them to ensure smooth connectivity and what not to do on the IX. Beginning with the rules and tools at your disposal. Look, most of you will be familiar with what not to do on an IX, but policy on the exchange is important, because as much as there is implied trust of your neighbors behaving nicely on a managed subnet, there must also be clear rules documented that members should be aware of. And that's via the peering technical link at the top. It's a handy page to review if you're unsure or in doubt, or even just to brush up on new gotchas from time to time, because we do update it. We also have 2 effective tools. You can help to validate and verify your session is behaving as expected. The first being the metrics collector. We use this internally for some graphing, but we also expose some public graphs, that being the aggregated IX traffic as well as per peer metrics. But just a little caveat here, some peers aren't too happy with us showing this stuff in public, so we have them disabled. So it's not an exact source of truth, but it's pretty good. But what will be a great source of truth is the new looking glass. This was rolled out when we released our route server automation last year. And this looking glass is just a bit nicer, a bit more focused on the IX, allowing you to easily filter through prefixes and drill down into the associated attributes like BGP community strings. Now, what impact do our policies effectively mean for a member? I'll give 2 examples I think you should consider the implications of. The first being about MAC address provisioning in our current state. Now, MAC addresses right now are statically configured. This means if you have maintenance coming up, we'll need to know the MAC address beforehand to permit it so you can re-establish your peering session. If you don't know the MAC ahead of time, let us know and we can book in a coordinated migration. Now, what happens most of the time is that we don't get notified, which is totally fine. But if it's an urgent thing, give us a call, because email is not going to be monitored at 3 a.m. and we have 24/7 engineers for a reason. And as much as it pains me to say, being one of them, you should use them because they're there. And reality is, static MAC provisioning is definitely a friction point, and we're working towards a new platform to automate these things. But as with anything good, it takes time, especially when you want it done properly, but we'll get there. The second example I think you should consider is utilizing BGP communities to control your traffic. And I'll give one random example. So looking at the available BGP communities that we have on our policy page, here we have an example prefix that is utilizing the do not advertise to community string. We can see it is a Vocus Transit customer, Cisco, OpenDNS at AS36692, announcing the community string of 0:6939, which is Hurricane Electric. This means that prefix advertisement via Vocus to the IX will not export to Hurricane Electric, which means it should not be visible on Hurricane Electric's perspective. And we can and we should confirm this via their tools. So as seen in the bottom, there's a looking glass picture that says the best path to that prefix is a direct path directly to that AS via Equinix IX. Now, I can't say exactly why this rule was implemented on their end for obvious reasons, but if you think a certain path or return path isn't ideal, maybe it conflicts with your network design, your redundancy, you may have a commercial requirement, or even if you just want to test to see the results, go ahead, utilize these communities. It can be a really handy tool to gain a bit more control over your traffic. I do want to take this time to let everyone know that we now have AS sets for IX Australia. So at the moment, we verify routes and we'll only send you trusted routes, but that doesn't mean you need to trust our routes. And that's where the IX AS set comes in. It was prompted by a member's policy change of only establishing AS sets or route sets, establishing sessions with AS sets or route sets, sorry. And like we thought it was a great idea to set it up. The threat of BGP hijacking is still real, and gone are the days of peering providers just accepting everything. But more and more we're seeing tier 1 providers strengthening their policies across the board. And we're probably going to see this happen a lot more this year. And overall, this is a good thing for internet security. And we'll have some more communications coming out for this soon, but you guys get the early scoop for jumping into this event. Now, on that note of AS sets, I want to go over a typical scenario of a common issue seen with connecting to the exchange, whereby your session is established, your advertisement from your BGP router is great, you're blocking announcements to AS1234 because you can, but you're not seeing any traffic. You've most likely been filtered. At the IX, we use 2 methods of building a peer filter on the route servers: AS sets, an AS set provided by the member, or if you don't have an AS set, we can create one for you based off a list of ASNs that you provide. If you need help creating an AS set, we're more than happy to help. Just ask. And just be mindful that we don't assume this policy for you. So you'll need to contact us and let us know. So peering filtering is a simple one. Check the looking glass and ensure your prefixes are accepted. If they're filtered, you'll see the reason. Have you checked yet? Here's a few examples of stuff we see with sort of a new BGP stuff. Like in example 1, we have the origin ASN is not in the AS set for that session. So this could be human error on that announcement. This could also mean the peer has a manually managed AS set. This could also mean the AS set was created at us and it wasn't updated. Or most commonly, they just haven't updated their AS set to include those ASNs that are being rejected. Example 2, we have invalid ASN in the AS path. In this case, it's an invalid ASN in the AS path. So it's a members of V6 announcement that includes a private ASN in the path. And obviously private ASNs are not allowed on the internet. So the only solution for this member is to fix up the announcement to the IX. And finally, we have an RPKI invalid route. This is an example of RPKI in action. In this case, we have a member's advertisement of that prefix is inconsistent with the associated route origin authorization record for that prefix, also known as a rollup. This could be working as intended, as the, sorry about that, as the owner, doesn't allow it to be permitted by another ASN, so that could be completely correct, or it could be an error on the member's configuration, and as it should originate from the correct ASN. We commonly see this, we commonly see members with problematic announcements. So right now we are working on ideas for a warning/notification system in the new portal to notify members of these issues, as right now it's up to the members to fix their announcements. And we feel it will be beneficial to the community as a whole to put in something like this. Now, my next point goes over a little bit over what not to do over a IX facing port and examples of what we see. So filtering at the route server from a BGP perspective is automated and working great. But the nature of being a layer 2 exchange means sometimes unwelcome layer 3 traffic appears that we can't filter out easily, and it's a nuisance for the peering neighborhood. We get a range of different things that come up, but most commonly microticks with a neighbor discovery protocol. It's enabled by default on all interfaces. That's mostly forgotten. So check your IP neighbor settings and ensure the IX facing port is removed. We also have some peers that use Linux for the IX facing port. from time to time. And Linux is great, but the defaults for a networking setup can be less than ideal for an IX-facing port. So in this case, here's a snippet of what a member had to do to stop proxy ARPing on our transit network, which he kindly shared to us for other members' awareness. Just a few more examples here. First, we have a LDP discovery process occurring at New South Wales IX. This member had 2 of their IX-facing sessions across different data centers attempting an LDP neighborship. I've hidden the MAC and IP, not to name and shame. And below it, we have a VRRP, Virtual Routing Redundancy Protocol session trying to establish via the IX. As per the policy, these things should be kept within your broadcast domain and should not leak out to the IX. There's many more examples, but I think you get the point. Follow the peering technical link and you'll be golden. A word of caution on this one though. Announcing the IX subnet to the world could have pretty significant consequences, and you definitely wouldn't want to be in that path if things actually go sideways. So here we see an announcement of the New South Wales IX subnet, but it was actually a result of a member's unfiltered export to a route views collector on the network that Hurricane Electric sources routing information from. So this wasn't actually live in the routing table, but even if this was being announced by the member, we wouldn't expect anything to happen as we have a roller backing us up. And if the PGP neighbor was adhering to that, would drop the route as invalid, vastly reducing any impact it could have had. And that's it. Thanks for peering nicely.
Thanks for that quick update there, Aaron. That's really helpful to us. We will post that onto our website at some stage soon, folks, so you'll all be able to have a look at it one more time again, and that will reinforce some of the important messages that we have. Okay, so I now want to introduce our dear colleague Robert here. Robert's a member of the Agricultural Technology Team at the Western Australian Government Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. He's based in Geraldton, Western Australia. Now, isn't that where all the fibres exit the country? He's based in Geraldton, Western Australia, where he works with the Perth Ag Tech Team, developing and co-funding high-performance digital networks that are being built and managed by retail service providers throughout regional Western Australia. Over the past 2 years, the team has delivered projects providing coverage of more than 100,000 square kilometres, mostly through 5.8 gigahertz class licensed fixed wireless technology, with performance exceeding 100 megabits per second download speeds in most areas. That's pretty neat. Additional projects are underway. Robert's background includes executive and consultancy roles in IT and telecoms, renewable energy, technology venture capital in Sydney, and previously in media, broadcasting, and academic medical research in the USA. And he's worked with some dirty, great big data centres. So over to you, Robert, if you would just share your screen and give us your prezzo. Thank you.
There we go, all up and good on your side?
Yep, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Narelle. Really appreciate the lovely introduction. I also would like to express thanks to Abby and the team for all the background work that they've done working with me to get things ready for today. Always been a big fan of IAA and always a big fan of what you folks are doing, not just for the IT world, but for the world generally. I really would like to see the world appreciate more what you mean to the world and how the world would be different without you. So thanks for everything. Big fan, continue to be. So thanks for coming along today, folks. I've changed the title a little bit from what the original title was. I'm going to now call it Fixing Regional Connectivity in WA. Is it a field of dreams, or are we on the highway to hell? And we're a little ways down that road. We'll talk about the journey, and we'll talk about the challenges that have come along the way, and we'll also talk a bit about the future. Because some of the things that we'll be dealing with are somewhat complex, you'll probably have some questions along the way. So feel free to make note of those as we go along, rather than us stopping and dealing with them as we go through, because it could tend to get a bit more complex. But feel free to put those in the chat, and we can organize those for later on for the Q&A. Now, the usual keyboard delay here. Let's see. There we go. Now, this first slide here, for anybody who's lived in regional Australia, you'll very, very, very much understand the frustrations that happen in a lot of parts of WA where we don't have the kind of connectivity we'd like. And standing on tops of vehicles, climbing on water towers, and any other number of OH&S irresponsible acts are commonplace in order to get connectivity. I'll apologize in advance for some of the slides. It's a bit of a dog's breakfast because I've created this presentation from many others to meet the requirements of today. So I do hope that it will still all make sense to you and it'll remain interesting as we go along. So I work for the WA state government, and I'd like to just note in advance that while you see a lot of things throughout the talk today will reference the NBN, and some of the things that we are doing are things that what I would say enhance what the NBN's job is. I don't want you to think that we're anti-NBN. We work very closely with the NBN, and we have a good working relationship with the NBN. So while you'll see some things that we have proposed and things that we are delivering appear to be as a result of NBN not performing, that's not always the case. We work very well with them. I came all the way to WA specifically to work with NBN to deploy the fiber to the premise in Geraldton, and that's done. There's now fiber to every occupiable premise in Geraldton. It works, it's stable, and it's doing what it was designed to do. So we continue to work with NBN on a regular basis. So I'll go through just quickly the agenda here. I'm not going to read off those, but we'll come to those as those different topics turn up in the presentation. So what WA really as a government is doing is taking a position of not replacing things necessary, but filling the gaps where the capacity or the connectivity or the type of connectivity that's available is not what we would consider to be fit for purpose or the world's best practice. So we're a small team of 8 based in Perth, and I'm based in Geraldton. We spend our time essentially allocating grant funding to private industry, primarily to commercialize connectivity projects that otherwise wouldn't happen on their own. We work on the mobile black spot projects. We look for proponents, and we look for people to essentially work together to form alliances and manage projects, cat herding, if you will, trying to get good organizations to work together that wouldn't work together without our help. We also do a lot of advocacy to the Commonwealth government for policy changes, and we do a fair bit of testimony before the parliamentary committees on a number of topics. For example, I've testified before the committee on the rollout of the NBN, the Productivity Commission on regional voice services, and other digital connectivity issues related to the regions. We also spend a lot of our time advising state ministers on various topics to do with things like 5G, repeaters, anti-competitive behavior, and all sorts of other network types of things. You may have seen on the news, we had a little what we would refer to as a weather event here on Sunday night. And Geraldton was literally right in the path of that weather event that wandered past us. Luckily, our friends lucky for us, but unfortunate for our friends north of us in Kalbarri, they took the full brunt of the storm. It landed at Kalbarri about 7 p.m. on Sunday night with full force of up to 180 kilometers an hour winds, taking out houses, infrastructure, and virtually everything else in its path. So by the time it got to us, 160 or so kilometers to the south, much of that energy had been burned off, and we got off relatively easily here in Geraldton, even though there are many, many trees down and other sorts of things that occurred here. But Kalbarri took it really, really hard, and will be many years recovering from what happened there. I'll give you just a little quick, we do have some sometimes firewall issues here, but let's just see if this little tiny video will play. Let's go back a bit here. It wants to come up. Here we go. So this was the cyclone going past Geraldton, right overhead. As you can see, it literally
sorry,
right over top of us. Hit Calberry and did some serious work there.
Robert, just a quick interruption here. You're not broadcasting the video. I think it's on your wrong screen. If you want to try again.
Let's see. Where we lost you. Okay, so you didn't see the animation. Sorry. Anyway, you didn't miss much. I'll go to the next one. Anyway, you can see this one, I assume. So these are the kinds of impacts that you get when cyclones go through communications infrastructure. This photo was taken on Monday morning, just this past week, at a site just outside of Geraldton, about 6 km away. And that's where much of the communications infrastructure for this area resides. The tower there went down when a tree flew through the air, hit the tower broadside, knocked the tower out, and also took out many of the cables that were on that container. And also, if you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, eventually the wind blew that container over and had to be righted again. So I won't show you the next video that's up the top because that probably won't play either, but you'll get the idea. It was filmed inside of that cabinet as the cyclone went past. So the kinds of things that can happen when these events go through. This is a map that shows all of the Telstra mobile sites that went offline as the cyclone went through. So each of these sites was down for a period of somewhere between mostly 24 hours, and some of the sites still remain down today. Grid power went out to 177 Telstra sites, and 113 of the sites actually went offline. The cyclone took out 81 power poles, and there were multiple fixed line and wholesale services knocked out. Now, interestingly enough, that wasn't because in most cases the infrastructure itself was damaged, but because the grid power and the backup power went out and resulted in subsequent transmission losses across the network. And some of these sites are still down today, 8 days later, with Telstra working around the clock trying to get those sites back online. On basically to the brunt of the talk, I've been using this slide for about 5 years pretty regularly because I think it shows something that you don't see in too many other graphs and charts that circulate generally, is that going all the way back to 1990, the data demand on networks is showing a very clear path upward. And that increase in demand on networks shows no sign of beginning to relent whatsoever, where this chart that was published in 2015 by Nokia and Bell Labs shows that that upward demand on networks is continuing to grow and grow and grow. And so therefore, in order to deliver on demands, the networks are going to have to continue to be able to adopt and adapt to new demands on traffic and grow along with that demand. So again, part of the problem, places like Australia generally and in WA specifically, for example, we are 10 times the size of the entire United Kingdom. So you can easily fit inside of just WA 10 geographic United Kingdoms. And with the mobile phone penetration globally now near reaching 100%, the quality of that connectivity is accentuating that inequality between those people who've got access to lots of bandwidth and those who have more or fewer skills. One of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis in the Western Australian government is that telecommunications from a policy perspective and a legislation perspective is exclusively a Commonwealth government responsibility. So if we don't like something, we can't actually make new regulations. We have to advocate for and petition the Commonwealth government to make changes in order to get policy changes that roll out into the states. So what we've adopted is a strategy of looking into the regions, seeing what's there, what has the industry delivered to the regions, what has NBN delivered to the regions, and what can we do as a state government to fill those gaps by advocating policy, creating disruption by adding new technology, by helping industry co-invest and helping the technology organizations adopt new technology to deal with those gaps that exist. I think a lot of people forget that the NBN was originally envisioned not as the be-all, end-all organization that was meant to provide connectivity for everyone, but it was really designed initially as a carrier of last resort, so that if there's nothing where you are, the NBN will provide at least something for everyone. But the real issue now has become, is that something that the NBN is delivering enough for regional businesses to be globally competitive? Is it enough for the state to attract new residents and new industries? And if it's not, then what can we as a state government do about that? So I want to show you some context. If you look at this map in front of you, that's a combination of the Midwest region of Western Australia, the Gascoyne, and the Southern Pilbara. That's about half of all of Western Australia. And if you look down at the very bottom left-hand corner there, you'll see a little bit of lavender kind of color. That's the totality of the NBN combined fixed line services and fixed wireless services on this map. Further south, you'll see a bit more of it, but for this part of Western Australia, that is the NBN fixed wireless and fixed line services. Everything else that's in white is on Skymuster. So if you're not able to use Skymuster to deliver a fit-for-purpose, globally competitive service for you, you're in trouble in the rest of those areas. Now, if I were to remove the fixed wireless component of that lavender little blotch down on the bottom there, the fixed line services would be so small that you'd probably not even see them on this map, just to give you a sense of context. So what's become is we've watched very carefully since the NBN deployment and keeping a very, very close eye on what was happening with Skymuster. And it's not surprising that Skymuster does what it was supposed to do, but I think a lot of people have unrealistic expectations for what a satellite service is capable of doing. I've been involved in the industry for many years and watched many cases of satellite rollouts that tend to take a similar sort of evolution from beginning with euphoria, migrating to a sense of realism, and then always ending with, well, we'll fix the problem by launching more satellites. And then the process starts over again. So people criticize the NBN Skymuster a lot, but it actually is reasonably doing what it was generally developed to do. And it's doing a relatively reasonable job at that. It's giving you access to a carrier of last resort that gives you capacity and speeds that are better than, in most cases, what was there before. So we work very closely with the NBN. We have a good relationship with the NBN. So I don't want this to come across as what we're doing here is to be critical of the NBN. We are providing a service that fills a gap beyond what the NBN is delivering. So the real question now becomes, the issue there is that NBN service is primarily a consumer grade service. Now they do offer also a business grade satellite service, but even that business grade satellite service is essentially a 13 by 13 megabit per second service. And a lot of organizations feel that they need more of performance than they can get. So we've looked at whether or not it's reasonable for us to enhance what's available. But the real question becomes, is it realistic for the WA government to fix that problem? In the old Field of Dreams movie, you remember if you saw it, the baseball field with the dream of if we build it, they will come. But we don't know. We started off not knowing whether if we created something new, would it actually meet the need of the regions? And could we do it in an affordable manner? Can it deliver performance that is world-class and fit for purpose? And very importantly, can it be future-proof so that when you need to upgrade that capacity and speed, can you do it without starting over again? Or are we just throwing money into the wind, risking a massive failure here that's just too big to fix, hence the expression highway to hell? Why do it? Here's the reason. Don't worry about looking at the actual numbers here. Just notice that there's a lot of zeros after those numbers. This is the regional production value in Western Australia, for example. It's about $112 billion of regional production value outside of Perth, another $173 billion in Perth. And our view is that that production value is so important that it is worthwhile for the government to spend significant amounts of money to make the organizations in these regions globally competitive and provide them with connectivity services that allow them to compete on a global scale. And if the cost of that is high, it's worth it, because otherwise those numbers are going to go lower when competitors overseas have access to better digital tools and use those tools to take that commerce away. So in 2017, just after NBN rollout started to go ahead, the Premier called together an agricultural industry engagement consortium. That's a good little government phrase to roll off the tongue, isn't it? And our Minister for Regional Development spent a lot of time on the ground talking to farmers, talking to people who lived in the regions to find out what the real issues were that needed to be fixed by the new government that had just taken power shortly before. And over throughout her travels around the regions, the number one concern that people on the ground expressed to her that was keeping them from being globally competitive was their digital connectivity. And that was the first thing that she heard everywhere she went. So as a result of that, we went and conducted an audit of all the assets in WA to find out what was actually out there, what could be potentially accessed and used by both third parties and government to assist with the increase of digital connectivity into the regions. And out of that came four channels, if you will, for which we created some programs to deliver outgoing projects. The first one was to deal with backhaul. That's still very much a work in progress. We'll talk about more at the end. The second was the mobile network, and that is participating in the Commonwealth Regional Black Spots program to increase the number of mobile towers in regional WA. And another program that we'll talk about a lot here called the Digital Farms Grant Program, rounds 1, 2, and 3, to provide grant program funding for regional and local retail service providers to deliver last mile solutions. And then in addition, there's some also programs called on-farm programs that are delivering through another series of projects called the E-Connected Grain Belt, digital exchange platforms, some IoT projects, and then some Doppler radars that have been deployed by the Bureau of Meteorology, all of which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So the Regional Telecommunications Program deals exclusively with the Mobile Black Spots program. I'm not going to just read through these. You can see from the maps, this is the digital connectivity in the form of digital mobile phone tower footprints that have been delivered since 2012 by these programs. A lot of coverage, but still a lot to go. But all up, 441 new base stations on the ground in WA since this program rolled out in 2012. Now, another program that came as a result of the work that the minister did was a program called the Digital Farm Grants Program to provide funding for last mile networks on the ground to get capacity out to the farms, primarily in the wheat belt region of WA. And for those of you not familiar with WA, the wheat belt is effectively a region that if you were to draw a line from Kalbarri, 160 kilometers north of Geraldton, out to Esperance, probably about a 6-hour drive from Perth to the east. And that whole area there to the southwest of there is referred to as the grain belt. I'll show you a map of it a little bit further down the track. So what are we trying to do with the Digital Farm Program? It's about delivering affordable, enterprise-grade, farm-scale broadband for regional WA. We initially set aside $7 million in co-contributions, and the proponents who responded to the request for proposals were to provide 50% co-contributions for us to then provide the other half. It resulted in 6 providers getting funding for 15 projects across 7 regions and providing connectivity to 1,445 farming enterprises across 65,000 square kilometers of the grain belt. The Round 3 project, which has just been announced a month or 2 ago, has built on those first 2 rounds. It's 5 more projects, 4 recipients, 600 agribusinesses, 43,000 more square kilometers, and up to $3 million for that area around Esperance and into the central wheat belt that wasn't covered by the first 2 programs. So how's this done? Why are we doing this and how does it work? So most of the new projects are based on the use of private fixed wireless networks where an internet service provider will set up transmission towers that receive backhaul from their points of interconnect that then connect back to the content delivery networks in Perth. And then from those transmission towers, they'll broadcast out to an antenna on the roof of a farmhouse or a home. Then the farmhouse then can distribute that connectivity inside the house and then onward around the rest of the farm as required. Most of the projects are based around 5.8 gigahertz carriers. There are some using 11 gigahertz for point-to-point capacity, and some of the round 3 programs are using LTD. Very importantly, all sites have grid-independent solar and battery power, and there's generators available when required, if in fact the solar and battery doesn't hold up over time. One of the great things about regional Western Australia, as well as most of other regional Australia, is that there are not many people living out in those areas, and so there's not a lot of issues with spectrum conflict when you're trying to use the class licensed spectrum. And if you don't have enough spectrum available in one channel, you can set up parallel links and more sectors and generally overcome any capacity issues to get the capacity from your facility out through to the points of presence and on to the various customers at the end. It's not a particularly complex mechanism. You set up wireless links, you send the capacity between them, and you send it on to the farmhouses. There's an amazing amount of stuff out there. This is just one example. This is some stuff that's out around from a company called Ubiquity. There are other companies like Cambium, half a dozen others that are now making similar kinds of things like this that can deliver these kinds of high performance projects into the areas. And most importantly, they can do it in a very, very cost-effective manner. This stuff is hardened to Australian conditions. It lasts for a number of years. You're getting now in excess of a gigabit per second point to point on each endpoint. I'll go to the next one to show you that you can get a little bit better view of the stuff. And this is showing the evolution from the bottom up from 2007, back when 802.11n was the standard, now to the most recent stuff out there. The spectral efficiency has increased from 7.5 bit per second per hertz up to now 21.2 bits per second per hertz, so 3 times that. Packets per second has gone from 25,000 packets per second up to 2 million, and the QAM encoding has jumped from 64 up to 4096. So amazing ability to get more data along similar amounts of spectrum that existed only in 2007. So here's the map of the first round of Digital Farm. You're looking at the very top left-hand of the corner there is Kalbarri. The bottom right-hand corner is Esperance, and Perth. I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but Perth is round about the middle there. So these areas are absolutely ginormous. The state government allocated only $2.3 million in matching funds to these 5 carriers to deliver this amount of coverage. Logic IT, Node 1 out of Geraldton built these 2. This is a Telstra tower here that was co-funded by the community, and some others down here by the other proponents that have delivered these other projects. Now, in this area here alone, there's 27 new towers that have been built for only $1 million in government contributions. So it's really amazing value for money. I'm going to refer you back again to this little purple blob there and let you see there versus there. Remarkable difference. Round 3, we're now adding these additional sectors. If you see the colored marks here, these are the new projects that will be delivered in round 3. The gray ones are the ones from round 1 and round 2. So you can see out of that grain belt area, we'll be covering a significant portion of that area in fixed wireless capacity. Backhaul works kind of like this. It's pretty straightforward, really. You set up the towers, and the towers link to each other. There's point-to-point connectivity to the towers, and each one of the towers, for the most part, also has access points on the towers that then spread that signal around to the residences up to 40 kilometers from each one of the towers. So the distance across the screen here you're looking at is round about, I'd say, 150 kilometers to give you a sense of scale there. This is what the towers look like. This is several different ones that are in the process of being put up. Most of them are around about 40 to 60 meters tall. They tend to be guide towers, steel towers. They're all put in with significant amounts of concrete in the ground, lots of guy wires. Here's the access points on the top. These are the sectors, sorry, the point-to-point connectors here. These are the access points, and these are UHF repeaters that send the signal and capacity on to the next tower down the road. Solar power, batteries inside, sea containers all in the ground with concrete, and they can be climbed quite easily and the equipment maintained or upgraded as required. So the kinds of speeds that we were hoping for were 100 by 40. That was the specification we put on these, compared to Skymuster, which was delivering 25 by 5. And the cost retail for the majority of the ones that have been deployed to date in this part of the world is roughly around about $90 a month, with data plans of at least 250 gigabytes per month during peak period, with normally unlimited off-peak. The biggest caveat to this particular approach has been the customer needs to contribute to the cost of the antenna on the roof to receive and then send the signal back to the network. And depending upon where you're located, the cost of that is usually somewhere between about $500 or $3,000. And it's all really depending upon the complexity involved to get that antenna installed. The equipment itself is only a couple $100. And as I said earlier, range depending on the terrain up to 40 kilometers from each one of the access points. But there may be some locations depending on terrain that may not be in the footprint of the signal. So if you look at the performance of the cost of putting up these towers versus the other things that are out there available, the cost of a typical fixed wireless tower in this program has ranged from around $80,000 to around $400,000 for a 40-meter to 60-meter steel guide tower, whereas the NBN fixed wireless or the network carrier 4G towers in regional areas typically cost around $800,000 to $1 million each. And these are typically a freestanding concrete monopole that's about 30 to 50 meters, or a freestanding steel frame matrix up to about 90 meters. So basically, these DPIRD funded private fixed wireless towers are delivering better than 100 megabits per second, and it's only cost a fraction of what those similar services provided by NBN and the carriers have delivered to the regions. So does it work? You judge for yourself. These are some speed tests that were actually done on user premises. Most of these date back to about 9 months to a year ago. But this is the kind of speeds and performance that the users are getting themselves. Notice, 9 millisecond ping time on the one on the right, 11 millisecond on the left. So these are real, actual loaded network performances that are getting to end users that are being delivered over these fixed wireless networks. You may or may not have seen in the news, this photo was taken on Monday morning in Kalbarri, just 160 kilometers north of where I sit at this moment. This town was devastated, to say the least. The cyclone came through with speeds of up to 170 kilometers an hour in a place that wasn't really ever built as a cyclone-proof town because it was never expected it would ever have one. And this is what about 70% of the town looks like today. Power was out. The power, by the way, was out in all of that map that you saw. I'll show you back here. This entire map here, except for Geraldton and a few places like the actual town center of Kalbarri, the power now, the mains power remains out across most of this region as we speak. So in this town, you can imagine what it's like to try and get anything done, even talking to loved ones about what's going on to let them know that you're okay. So how did the fixed wireless networks that were built in this area actually survive? 27 towers were in the path of the cyclone. None of them that have been inspected, and as far as we know, they've all been inspected by now. None of those were actually damaged, other than a few relay dishes were shifted by the winds that have now been readjusted. By comparison, 113 mobile phone tower sites went out of service. And that was primarily not due to the fact that the towers were actually damaged, but the mains power went out. And the only way to get those towers back up again was basically to physically transport generators out to those sites, which Telstra has been doing furiously for the last 8 days to get many of those sites back online and to get the battery and solar going back up again. But It is of note that Telstra did manage to get Kalbarri restored within 24 hours by using portable generators, which was an urgent situation. They really did step up their game and get mobile coverage back into Kalbarri. Now, the owner of the regional service provider that's providing the fixed wireless rushed up to Kalbarri the next day, set up a free fixed wireless at the Shire. And this is a speed test that's come off his mobile phone. This is not even a wired service. This is a wireless service that's come off of a mobile phone from in front of the Kalbarri fixed wireless, the Kalbarri Shire office. A similar cyclone impact hit Northampton, which is only 50 kilometers north of where I sit today, as well as Perenjori, which is in the top left-hand corner. That's out into the wheat belt about 150 kilometers eastward. The cyclone ripped through and just left a trail like this through the whole area. So the owner of the ISP got on his car, drove to Northampton on Friday afternoon, set up another fixed wireless free service outside of Northampton. And here's the performance coming off the Northampton fixed wireless free Wi-Fi that's been operational there for the last few days or so. So some of the other programs that our team are working on include what's called an E-Connected Grain Belt project. We've set up, I think it's 100 and it's actually being obscured by the bottom here. Sorry. Anyway, across our network, we've got 285 weather stations across all agricultural areas, all networked together, and can be viewed by the public at no cost to anyone on this web page. So if you want to write down that URL there, you can log on to any one of those sites. You can see what the weather's doing in all manner of different variables, from things like soil moisture, temperature, humidity, radars, everything, to see what the weather's doing. You can even create virtual weather stations in areas where there aren't weather stations to forecast what the conditions are at those times. It's getting massive amounts of traffic, 11,000 visitors per month. It's the busiest website on all of DPIRD's internet. So huge success. Another project we've allocated a little bit of money to are some matching grants for on-farm IoT projects that have been primarily taken up by grower groups and agricultural schools and colleges, testing a variety of IoT agricultural technologies. And those are all in progress, most of which will be completed by the end of June this year. And they involve things like wireless mesh, some LoRaWAN stuff, some Sigfox, and then some private LTE networks, getting IoT connectivity out into the regions. Another project going on just recently started is a regeneration of the southern rangelands, where very, very large areas of cattle properties have been severely degraded because of the cattle presence, and they're now using some IoT type technologies to monitor the state of the dry rangelands out there for recovery. And it's particularly a bit more difficult in those areas because some of these areas fringe around the area where the square kilometer array telescope is, which is surrounded by a 200 kilometer bubble of radio quiet zone, where most things between about 70 megahertz and 26 gigahertz are restricted. So you can't use the normal ways of doing things out there. So we're now helping this group to set up some digital connectivity that doesn't interfere with the telescope communications in that region. We are also working very closely with the Commonwealth government on a program that was just announced, or the successful applicants were just announced on the 16th of April, called the Regional Connectivity Program. $90 million allocated Australia-wide, 81 projects, 15 of which are in WA, targeting what they call place-based communications, very much like those digital farm grant programs. And if you will notice, they'll probably be very similar to the model we use to create the digital farm program with. And these will start to be deployed as soon as contracts can be signed with the proponents on those 81 projects across the country. Another project that's been very close to us for about 5 years or so now, that's still having a few issues getting some traction, but we still have great promise and great expectations for is a project called WA SuperNet. And that is a project that is designed to provide a new set of fiber backhaul around regional WA on a carrier neutral open access basis. The organization that's been working on that has run into a few challenges along the way. The project still exists, and they're still looking for investment funds from industry to supplement the funds that government had originally put forward, but have been put on hold because of the lack of industry investment in the project to date. But those of you who know how IAA operates will recognize the model. It's basically assuming that you can set up an environment where the public good is most at heart here. And if you can set up a fiber that is equally available to all on an equal access basis, generally on a nonprofit model, we're looking at a model that would bring broadband into individual town sites in the form of fiber. And then that fiber would be connected directly to the railways, to the railway corridors, giving access to local governments, emergency services, clinics, community resources center, and all state government utilities. And then taking feeds off that town site fiber hub and running out into the regions where possible directly to the farm, and where not feasible to run fiber, then to continue on with digital farm type programs on fixed wireless to generate that high capacity backhaul and then last mile connectivity into the individual farms. So that the idea is to create an environment where government is funding open access infrastructure. Our group has been working very closely over the last year with Infrastructure Australia, who are creating a 10-year national infrastructure strategy, which now, for the first time, mind you, includes digital connectivity as a priority along with other hardware infrastructure. The WA government has spent a lot of time extensively contributing to this program, and we're advocating for government-funded infrastructure to be mandated as carrier neutral and open access in this policy going forward, as I'm sure anyone who's familiar with IAA will very much understand. Now, going to the future, and this is not just the future, some of this is actually happening already. If you want to make a note, and just write down in Google when you get a chance after this, there's an organization called Origo, O-R-I-G-O. And if you just Google origo.farm, they're already delivering scenarios like this in regional WA. It's a Perth-based organization that goes out to farms and takes access to high-capacity backhaul and then reticulates that high-capacity broadband around the farm to do things like monitor controlling systems on feeding troughs. So for example, if you've got limited water at a particular feeding point and you want to limit that water to your cattle and not feed the dingoes and feed the kangaroos, you need to know who's at the water trough, and you need to be able to turn that water off and on remotely. They set up remote cameras, they set up sensors, they set up remote control gates that can open and close water tanks, they can open and close gates, and they can see what's actually going on in these areas. They can monitor the soil content, they can monitor the dam levels, all this done from the farmhouse without having to drive sometimes literally hours to get from one side of a farm to the other and spend lots of money and petrol to get across the farms. They've got remote weather stations set up around the farms. They've got remote control headers, tractors, and machinery operating. They've got full high capacity broadband reticulated out to the sheds and to the remote workshops. They've got folks using devices in the fields with high capacity broadband in places where there's no mobile phone coverage. And the beauty of this model is that once you've landed to the farm here with your high capacity link, whether it's E-band wireless or whether it's fiber to the farm, all the traffic that then gets exchanged within the farm is on net and therefore not charged as a, if you will, transit across the network. So you set up your owned network on your farm, and all the data exchange happens basically at zero cost for OpEx other than power and use. So the outcomes of much of what we've done here in the last couple of years are showing that private fixed wireless can give you many times the coverage of an NBN footprint for a fraction of the cost. And we've also demonstrated that these projects are delivering often 10 times what the RSPs are reporting that NBN fixed wireless is providing for a similar monthly cost. And you can upgrade the kit at the end for a small fraction of what it costs for the LTE kit that's on the NBN fixed wireless stuff. Spectrum's not a problem. The reliability and uptime has been just extraordinary. And as we've shown in some of the earlier screen grabs, the quicker recovery during natural disasters has been already demonstrated in the field. That technology changes rapidly, and if you've got low-cost kit at the end, then obviously you can replace that kit more frequently. However, there is still a very dramatic need for more carrier-neutral open access fiber backhaul for the future as these wireless networks start to run at capacity, as those demands nonetheless are going to continue to go forward. Now, the question we always get asked is, well, isn't Elon Musk going to come along and make all this work that you're doing just irrelevant and redundant now? It all sounds great. And as you'll notice up in the top right-hand corner there, as soon as Starlink lands in Western Australia, I'll be one of the first customers to find out, because they've already taken my deposit payment on a Starlink and Starlink satellite, and they've told me that it's coming as soon as WA is on their map. By the way, the WA government has also signed a non-disclosure agreement with SpaceX. They're telling us a few things, not much that isn't already publicly available, by the way. And we have already engaged for the last couple of years with Airbus about their Zephyr program, which is an approach using high altitude gliders in high altitude platforms. So these technologies are promising, but I'm old enough to remember things like Teledesic and Sky Station that spent many billions of dollars trying to do the same thing back in the 90s and failed miserably, and spent a lot of money doing so. There are also a lot of things in the equation with situations like Starlink that are not well known publicly. For example, that dish that you see up in the top right-hand corner there doesn't move, and yet the satellites are moving, and that dish has to somehow track them. So what that dish is a highly complex active phased array antenna with 5 layers of chips operating 24/7 to give you what is effectively virtual movement of that dish to track the satellites. And the power consumption of that dish is 113 watts continuous. If you do the sums on that at Western Australia retail power rates, you're looking at basically the cost of running a full-size refrigerator, which is about $220 to $250 a year, just in electricity cost. And you're likely to get similar kinds of issues with rain fade and other kinds of satellite related interference. But it is a promising technology. We're keeping a good eye on it. We have high hopes for it. And if somebody could come along and also deliver a satellite to mobile phone direct satellite service, you can imagine how useful that would be in regional Australia where there are black spots. So the WA government is monitoring all these projects. We talk to everybody we can on a regular basis, and we do participate in these projects as appropriate. So we're looking at all these things. There's a whole list of them you can see there. We talk to SpaceX on a regular basis. We were also engaging with Google Loon, and that was looking promising. Unfortunately, that project's been canceled. The photograph in the bottom left-hand corner, I took that photograph with my personal SLR camera of a Google Loon balloon passing directly overhead back in December or so at about 22 kilometers above Geraldton. So there we are. That's the update of what we're up to. I thank you very much and happy to take any amount of questions and discussion as we go forward.
Oh, thank you so much there, Robert. That's fascinating stuff. We've heard so much about Section 51 of the Constitution this year, where the government gives its telecommunication, or where the federal government gets telecommunications powers from, and also quarantine.
Oh, indeed, indeed.
So I wasn't surprised to see it come up again tonight. And, you know, when I worked in my days back at Optus, the then CEO, Paul O'Sullivan, used to say that setting off a satellite was just the same as putting at least $150 million into a mound and lighting a firecracker under it and hoping for the best.
I love it.
Yeah. And one more observation I'd like to make too is you talked there about these wireless equipment, which is all quote unquote hardened to Australian conditions. Now, I always find that entertaining, especially since you've shown us how well you've gone through the cyclone. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant that you managed to stay online throughout that. I'm absolutely astounded. But I've seen plenty of photos over the years of eagles nesting in towers and geckos fried in the back of pieces of equipment. So have you had some good fun stuff like that as well?
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that. I can't think of any specific instances of any of those. Not to say that they don't happen. Most of the towers tend to be at heights that likely eagles are not going to be interested in because they're probably too high for that and therefore exposed to the elements more than an eagle would like. Offhand, Narelle, I can't think. I can find out if someone's got specific questions about that. I can speak to the service providers and come back with some specific ones. But the most difficult things are typically, or how shall I say this? The most likely candidates that are causing problems are the, shall we say, two-legged ferals. And yes, solar panels do get stolen.
yeah, they're eminently redeployable, aren't they? Very useful. Yeah, I've also got visions of people also taking matters into their own hands when they're waiting for service and repair. You know, I've got visions of the old outback mechanics, you know, doing the same sorts of things and bashing, I don't know, old garbage tin hubs back into the shape for new antennas or
you mean percussive maintenance.
yeah, getting stuff to work better. I'm just having a look over to see into the Q&A in the chat. You've already you answered the first question, which was about Elon Musk's little effort, which will be great. And we've got another question here called a company called Field Solutions Group. Are they participating in any of the current programs in WA?
Yes, they are. We've worked with them since they expressed interest in several of our recent, I can't say too much because some of this isn't public information yet, but let's just say that you will be hearing more about Field Solutions Group and the WA state government in the near future. We are actively engaging with Field Solutions Group, and there are some brilliant individuals involved with Field Solutions Group that I'm quite excited about working with going forward. I should be quiet because some of this information isn't actually in the public domain yet.
And I might also point out that as a point of conflict of interest, that there's a key person there who is my chair, who is also my chair. Yeah. So just so in the interest of full disclosure, there we are. That wasn't a Dorothy Dixer in there. It was an honest
answer.
Question.
Big yes in capitals.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions? People, please take the opportunity to ask now. We're happy to put them forward. It's I'm always amazed by just how far you can get with all this public spectrum. You know, that I think I saw a few years back. I think the record was something like 150 kilometres for a service out of single cells, which I just think is absolutely mind-boggling.
I actually saw on the I believe it was on the Ubiquity webpage, a customer in Italy on the island of Sardinia had confirmed greater than 100 megabit per second single point-to-point link in excess of 300 kilometers.
Oh, wow.
But I'm sure that's an anomaly.
Yeah, on a good day with the clouds in just the right place.
Yeah. Having said that, the same providers that are providing services for Digital Farm have established links out to the Abrolhos Islands, which are almost 90 kilometers offshore. They're delivering from public spectrum class licensed 5.8 gig using the same technology in Digital Farm. They've got a tower at the Pink Lake, which is, I think, about 150 50 meters above sea level, going out somehow using some sort of ducting. It's not entirely point-to-point visual contact, but they're still managing to deliver over 200 megabits per second to some fishermen's huts on those offshore islands. I first looked at it and didn't believe it until I saw the live video.
Yeah.
I'd love to have somebody who's a proper engineer explain to me how that's possible to get 5.8 gigahertz to actually travel over the horizon.
I think they call it diffraction, don't they?
I think it's supposedly called ducting, tropospheric ducting with the AM radio when I worked in that space a long time ago, but I don't think it's 5.8 gig is bouncing off the troposphere.
Weird stuff. Yeah. Actually, I know we've got at least one physicist out there. I've given up physics for a long time, so hopefully one of my physics colleagues back in there might actually put his hand up and give us a good answer and show us the maths. But I think that those wave functions are beyond me these days. So I suppose then we'll have to probably get John Deere and the likes of which on the exchange now, just to deliver all the content and upgrade for all the software that needs to be fed into all of those remote farm systems and
edge computing. That's one thing we didn't talk about. That's absolutely the topic of a future talk like this. So I would like to hereby put in my recommendation for you to find an edge computing expert for a future talk. And we are engaging with some of those providers as well already.
Yeah, well, if we can find them, we're happy to put them on. Okay, well, look, I'll put another call out for any further questions, folks. It's great being able to tap people's brains like this. So take the opportunity now. Any more questions, comments, thoughts from the people assembled? Yeah, we do have one here. What's this? We've got here, in a previous job, 2.4 gigahertz links worked for us over water. The signal reflected on the water and would change with the tides. 5.8 gigahertz wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's a different frequency after all. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do not know.
I would love to understand the physics behind how it's actually working. In fact, interestingly enough, when I mentioned that same scenario to one of the engineers at the Field Solutions Group, he was ready to bet me some several $1,000s worth of his own money that it wasn't possible until I told him I'd seen the videos.
Well, they did show videos of all sorts of things that, we now have deep fake technology. Maybe it's something similar. Who knows?
I can promise you this was real.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions, folks. So it might be that we do need to move across to the last part of the presentation. Well, in that case, I would like to then thank Robert for his time and effort in pulling all this together, and for all the fun stuff he's out there doing for us, for the country, for the technology, for bringing us all together. It's really good stuff to hear. And thank you for the advertising of the association and our work with the exchanges. It's lovely having somebody.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity, and thanks so much to Abby and Kitty and Nick and the group, and Aaron for pulling all the background stuff together to make all this happen. Really appreciate the work they've all done.
Well, you're very welcome, and if you're going to keep up doing these fun sorts of projects, mate, you can come again and do it again.
Anytime.
So heading over to our final part of the proceedings, we've thanked Robert. We'll thank Aaron as well, because Aaron really did well there, stepping up and reminding us of how not to open ourselves up to BGP hijacks and such like, and how to play nicely on the exchange. But I do need to announce that the Lucky Door Prize this evening was won by Christian Pereira and John Loaiza. So if you two could be stand by for a notice and a confirmation of your address, we will be able to send you through these funky little microtick access points, which I believe are all USB accessible and really fun. So we're happy to send those on to you if we just confirm what address to send it to. Now, what we normally do at this point in the evening is to promote all of our happy attendees to panelists, turn off the broadcast to Facebook, stop broadcast